Saddam Hussein, known mononymously as Saddam, was an Iraqi politician and revolutionary who was the fifth president of Iraq from 16 July 1979 until 9 April 2003. He also served as Prime Minister of Iraq first from 16 July 1979 until 23 March 1991, and later from 29 May 1994 to 9 April 2003. He was a leading member of a revolutionary Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party and later the Baghdad-based Ba'ath Party and its regional organization, the Iraqi Ba'ath Party, which exposed Ba'athism as a mix of Arab nationalism and Arab socialism. Saddam was born in Al-Awaja, Saladin Governorate near Tikrit to a prominent Sunni Muslim family. He joined the Arab Socialist Ba'ath Party in 1957 and the Baghdad-based Ba'ath Party and its regional organization, the Iraqi Ba'ath Party. He played a key role in the 17 July Revolution and was appointed vice president by Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr. Saddam nationalized the Iraq Petroleum Company, diversifying the Iraqi economy. He presided over the Second Iraqi Kurdish War in 1974 to 1975 following al-Bakr resignation in 1979. Saddam formally took power in 1979, although he had already been the de facto head of Iraq for several years. Positions of power in the country were mostly filled with Sunni Arabs, a minority that made up only a fifth of the population. In September 1980, Saddam abrogated the Algiers Agreement and invaded Iran, marking the start of the Iran-Iraq War of 1980 to 1988, which resulted in a stalemate ceasefire. Later, Saddam accused its ally Kuwait of slant drilling Iraqi oil fields and occupied Kuwait, initiating the Gulf War between 1990 and 1991. Iraq was defeated by a 39-country coalition led by the United States. The United Nations subsequently placed sanctions against Iraq. He suppressed the 1991 Iraqi uprisings of the Kurds and the Shia Muslims, which sought to gain independence or overthrow the government. Afterwards, Saddam adopted an anti-American stance and established the Faith Campaign, pursuing an Islamist agenda in Iraq. Saddam's rule was marked by numerous human rights abuses, including an estimated 250,000 arbitrary killings. In 2003, the United States and its allies invaded Iraq, falsely accusing Saddam of developing weapons of mass destruction and of having ties with Al-Qaeda. The Ba'ath Party was banned and Saddam went into hiding. After his capture on 13 December 2003, the trial of Saddam Hussein took place under the Iraqi interim government. On 5 November 2006, Saddam was convicted by an Iraqi court of crimes against humanity related to the 1982 killing of the 148 Iraqi Shia and sentenced to death by hanging. He was executed on 30 December 2006. A highly divisive cult of personality, Saddam is accused of repressive authoritarian government, which several analysts have described as totalitarian, although the applicability of that label has been contested. Saddam Hussein was born on 28 April 1937 in Al-Awaja, a small village near Tikrit, to Hussein Abdi al-Majid and Suba Tulfa al-Musalat. They both were from the Albu Nasir tribe, a tribe that has descended from Ahmed bin Hussein Nasiruddin, who was the descendant of Imam Hussein bin Ali. The Albu Nasir tribe had settled in Tikrit after migrating from Yemen. Saddam's brother and father Hussein Abdi al-Majid al-Tikriti both died of cancer before his birth. These deaths made Saddam's mother Suba Tufal al-Musalat so depressed that she attempted to abort her pregnancy and commit suicide. Suba would have nothing to do with him, and Saddam would eventually be taken in by an uncle. His mother remarried, and Saddam gained three half brothers through this marriage. His stepfather Ibrahim al-Hassan treated Saddam harshly after his return, and according to psychological profile created by the CIA, beat him regularly, sometimes to wake him up. At around the age of 10, Saddam fled the family and returned to live in Baghdad with his uncle Khairat Talfa, who became a fatherly figure to Saddam. Talfa, the father of Saddam's future wife, was a devout Sunni Muslim and a veteran of the 1941 Anglo-Iraqi War between Iraqi nationalists and the United Kingdom, which remained a major colonial power in the region. Talfa later became the mayor of Baghdad during Saddam's time in power until his notorious corruption compelled Saddam to force him out of office. The Ba'ath Party was originally represented in the Qasim's cabinet. The party turned against him for his refusal to join Gamal Abdel Nasser's United Arab Republic. To strengthen his own position within the government, Qasim created an alliance with the Iraqi Communist Party, which was opposed to any notion of Arabism. Later that year, the Ba'ath Party leadership was planning to assassinate Qasim. Saddam was a leading member of the operation at the time. The Ba'ath Party was more of an ideological experiment than a strong anti-government fighting machine. The majority of its members were either educated professionals or students, and Saddam fit the bill. The choice of Saddam was, according to journalist Coughlin, hardly surprising. The idea of assassinating Qasim may have been Nasser's, and there is speculation that some of those who participated in the operation received training in Damascus, which was then part of the UAR. Per Coughlin, no evidence has ever been produced to implicate Nasser directly in the plot. Saddam himself is not believed to have received any training outside of Iraq, as he was a late addition to the assassination team. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, as vice chairman of the Revolutionary Command Council, formerly al-Bakar's second in command, Saddam built a reputation as a progressive, effective politician. At this time, Saddam moved up the ranks in the new government by aiding attempts to strengthen and unify the Ba'ath Party and taking a leading role in addressing the country's major domestic problems and expanding the party's following. In 1976, Saddam rose to the position of general in the Iraqi armed forces and rapidly became the strongman of the government. As the ailing elderly al-Bakr became unable to execute his duties, Saddam took an increasingly prominent role as the face of the government, both internally and externally. He soon became the architect of Iraq's foreign policy and represented the nations in all the diplomatic situations. He was the de facto leader of Iraq some years before he formally came to power in 1979. He slowly began to consolidate his power over Iraq's government and the Ba'ath Party. Relationships with the fellow party members were carefully cultivated, and Saddam soon accumulated a power circle of support within the party. Saddam convened an assembly of Ba'ath Party leaders on 22nd July 1979. During the assembly, which he ordered videotaped, Saddam claimed to have found a fifth column within Ba'ath Party and directed Muhi Abdel Hussein to read out a confession and the names of the 68 alleged co-conspirators. These members were labeled disloyal and were removed from the room one by one, taken into custody. After the list was read, Saddam congratulated those still seated in the room for their past and future loyalty. The 68 people arrested at the meeting were subsequently tried together and found guilty of treason. 22 were sentenced to execution. Other high-ranking members of the party formed the firing squad. By 1st August 1979, hundreds of high-ranking Ba'ath Party members had been executed. Iraqi society features along lines of language, religion, and ethnicity. The Ba'ath Party, secular by nature, adopted the pan-Arab ideologies, which in turn were problematic for significant parts of the population. Following the Iranian Revolution of 1979, Iraq faced the prospect of regime change from two Shiite factions, Dawa and SCIRI, which aspired to model Iraq on its neighbor Iran as a Shiite theocracy. A separate threat to Iraq came from parts of the ethnic Kurdish population of northern Iraq, which opposed being part of an Iraqi state and favored independence, an ongoing ideology which had preceded Ba'ath Party rule. To alleviate the threat of revolution, Saddam afforded certain benefits to the potentially hostile population. Membership in the Ba'ath Party remained open to all Iraqi citizens regardless of background, and repressive measures were taken against its opponents. During his leadership, Saddam promoted the idea of dual nationalism, which combines Iraqi nationalism and Arab nationalism, a much broader form of ethnic nationalism which supports Iraqi nationalism and links it to matters that impact Arabs as a whole. Saddam Hussein believed that the recognition of the ancient Mesopotamian origins and heritage of Iraqi Arabs was complementary to supporting Arab nationalism. Iraqi's relationship with the Arab world have been extremely varied. Relationship between Iraq and Egypt violently ruptured in 1977 when two nations broke relations with each other following Iraqi's criticism of Egyptian President Anwar Sadat's peace initiatives with Israel. In 1978, Baghdad hosted an Arab League summit that condemned and ostracized Egypt for accepting the Camp David Accords. Egypt's strong material and diplomatic support for Iraq in the war with Iran led to warmer relations and numerous contacts between senior officials. Despite the continued absence of ambassadorial-level representation, since 1983, Iraq has repeatedly called for restoration of Egypt's natural role among Arab countries. In early 1979, Iran's Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi and Pahlavi dynasty were overthrown by the Islamic revolution, thus giving way to an Islamic republic led by the Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. The influence of revolutionary Shiite Islam grew apace in the region, particularly in countries with large Shiite populations, especially Iraq. Saddam feared that the radical Islamic ideas hostile to his secular rule were rapidly spreading inside his country among the majority of the Shiite population. The Al-Anfal campaign was the genocidal campaign against the Kurdish people and many others in Kurdish regions of Iraq, led by the government of Saddam Hussein and headed by Ali Hassan al-Majid. The campaign takes its name from Quranic chapter 8, which was used as a code name by the former Iraqi Ba'athist administration for a series of attacks against the Peshmerga rebels and the mostly Kurdish civilian population of the rural northern Iraq, conducted between 1986 and 1989, culminating in 1988. This campaign also targeted Shabaks and Yazidis, Assyrians, Turkoman people, and Mandaeans, and many villages belonging to these ethnic groups were also destroyed. Human Rights Watch estimates that between 50,000 and 100,000 people were killed. Some Kurdish forces put the number higher, estimating that 182,000 Kurds were killed. The end of the war with Iran served to deepen latent tensions between Iraq and its wealthy neighbor Kuwait. Saddam urged the Kuwaitis to waive the Iraqi debt accumulated in the war, some 30 billion, but they refused. Saddam pushed oil exporting countries to raise oil prices by cutting back production. Kuwait refused, then led the opposition in the OPEC to the cuts that Saddam had requested. Kuwait was pumping large amounts of oil and thus keeping prices low, when Iraq needed to sell high-priced oil from its wells to pay off its huge debt. On 2nd August 1990, Saddam invaded Kuwait, claiming assistance to Kuwaiti revolutionaries, thus sparking an international crisis. On 4th August, an Iraqi-backed provisional government of Free Kuwaiti was proclaimed, but a total lack of legitimacy and support for it led to an August 8 announcement of a merger of the two countries. On 28 August, Kuwait formally became the 19th governorate of Iraq, just 2 years after the 1988 Iraq and Iran truce. Saddam Hussein did what his Gulf patrons had earlier paid him to prevent. Having removed the threat of Iranian fundamentalism, he overran Kuwait and confronted his Gulf neighbors in the name of Arab nationalism and Islam. Iraq's ethnic and religious divisions, together with the brutality of the conflict that this has endangered, laid the groundwork for post-war rebellions. In the aftermath of the fighting, social and ethnic unrest among the Shiite Muslims, Kurds, and dissident military units threatened the stability of Saddam's government. Uprisings erupted in the Kurdish north and Shia southern and central parts of Iraq, but were ruthlessly repressed. Uprisings in 1991 led to the death of 100,000 to 180,000 people, mostly civilians. In 2002, Austrian prosecutors investigated Saddam government transaction with Fritz Edelinger that possibly violated Austrian money laundering and embargo regulations. Fritz Edelinger, president of the General Secretary of the Society for Austro-Arab Relations, GOAB, and former member of Socialist International Middle East Committee, was an outspoken supporter of Saddam Hussein. In 2005, an Austrian journalist revealed that Fritz Edelinger, GOAB, had received $100,000 from an Iraqi front company as well as donations from Austrian companies soliciting business in Iraq. In 2002, a resolution sponsored by the European Union was adopted by the Commission for Human Rights, which stated that there had been no improvement in human rights crisis in Iraq. The statement condemned President Saddam Hussein's government for its systematic widespread and extremely grave violations of human rights and international humanitarian laws. The resolution demanded that Iraq immediately put an end to its summary and arbitrary executions, the use of rape as a political tool, and all enforced and involuntary disappearances. Many members of the international community, especially the US, continue to view Saddam as a bellicose tyrant who was a threat to the stability of the region. In his January 2002 State of the Union address to Congress, President George W. Bush spoke of an axis of evil consisting of Iran, North Korea, and Iraq. Moreover, Bush announced that he would possibly take action to topple the Iraqi government because of the threat of its weapon of mass destruction. Bush stated that the Iraqi regime had plotted to develop anthrax and nerve gas and nuclear weapons for over a decade. Iraq continues to flaunt its hostility towards America and to support terror. In April 2003, Saddam's whereabouts remained in question during the weeks following the fall of Baghdad and the conclusion of major fighting of the war. Various sightings of Saddam were reported in the weeks following the war, but none were authenticated. At various times, Saddam released audio tapes promoting popular resistance to his ousting. On 30th June 2004, Saddam Hussein was held in U.S. custody by the U.S. forces at the U.S. base Camp Cropper, along with 11 other senior Ba'athist leaders. Was handed over to the interim Iraqi government to stand trial for crimes against humanity and other offenses. Saddam was hanged on the 1st of Eid ul-Adha on 30th December 2006, despite his wish to be executed by firing squad, which he argued was the lawful military capital punishment, citing his military position as the commander-in-chief of the Iraqi military. The execution was carried out at Camp Justice, an Iraqi army base in Kadimia, a neighborhood of northeast Baghdad.